putting a scope at the heart of quality of life in our city the way they have the last 2 years. So I watched Cleo from a distance. She started the Safe Project Facebook group. She started shaming her council member and the mayor and the police chief to show up at town hall meetings. She'd show up, put a chair with their name on it. Next time she'd do it, they'd show up. She did it time and time again. And she started to show, if you get away from the theatrics of city council meetings, which are totally useless, total waste of time, you'd be better spent digging the hole and filling it that day than spending 13 hours at council meeting, waiting to testify for 3 minutes as I did the first time, waiting 13 and a half hours. Don't do it. It's a waste of time. They don't want to listen. They don't care. They've made their decisions. They go into executive session, have a 2-hour lunch, come out, they've already decided. They're sitting there coloring and signing things and playing on their phone while they're supposed to be listening to people's feedback. So with Cleo, again, I watched this, and I watched her effectively kill this particular location for a homeless shelter. Not because she's anti-homeless, and not because she's anti-homeless shelter. She's against them in places that threaten senior citizens and families and children, and that's a perfectly legitimate policy position to hold, right? So I just watched this average person, this citizen, this person that could be your neighbor, effectively stop the city council from doing what they had already decided to do. They don't propose things, get feedback, and then amend their decision. They make decisions, tell you what they are, and then don't change course. And so you have to sue them, you have to put things on the ballot, you have to shame them with town hall meetings. And if you're really relentless and really focused and won't take no for an answer, and if you have the right position, the justifiable, defensible position, you can prevail. And Cleo did that. And so I forget exactly when along this timeline, it's been a brutal 2 years, when she and I partnered, but we did. And we sat down and we got to know each other. We didn't know each other very well. And we have sharp differences on national politics and even state politics. But we have been, I think, unified about one thing, and I think it's something that everyone here will agree with. Local issues should not be partisan, period. You want to get in a food fight at the state level, at the national level, go do it. We all know it's fake wrestling, it's, pro wrestling, it's all fake. Everybody's, playing to each side and doing their thing for primaries and fundraising and all that. I get it, I worked up there for 10 years. If you're interested in outcomes, if you're interested in standard living and making parks safe and making schools as good as they can be, and giving people an opportunity to open small business and risk capital and serve their customers and make their employees safe, those issues aren't partisan. We have assholes at the city council that try to make them partisan for their own purposes, but they're not partisan. So Cleo and I have been fully committed, true partners from the very beginning, on the belief that if we both agree on something, it's fundamentally not partisan. It can't be partisan. She wouldn't let me do something that is a Republican agenda, and I wouldn't let her do something that's a Democratic agenda. We have stayed totally focused on these issues. So on the homeless thing, look, I'm trying to remember. So August, I think I testified for the first time in August of 2019, total waste of time. She'd been testifying for months before that. The governor threatened the council, said, if you don't fix this mess, we will. They went through a long, dog and pony show. They eventually made 3 changes to the camping ordinance. Totally justifiable, totally basic changes. Ban camping on sidewalks, good. Sidewalk is a public right of way, it's there for a very specific purpose. 2, ban camping within 10 feet of the entrance to a home or a business, good. You should be able to enter your home or your business without having to step over someone in a sleeping bag. 3, they decided to ban them in what they call fire and flood mitigation zones. These are areas of town that are very prone to fires and floods. Good, we don't want people being victimized in that way. You had 2 members of the city council vote against those changes. Okay, 2 members who think they should be camping on sidewalks, they should be camping in fire and flood mitigation zones, and they should be camping within 10 feet of the entrance to a home or business. So I just want everyone to understand what we're dealing with. So they made those changes, but the reason I'm here tonight, the reason Cleo's here tonight, the reason this event is even being held, is what happened at the end of that vote. The council, the mayor that night said, and I was actually on my way home at this point because I've been there all day and all night, we're not going to consider any more changes to the homeless ordinance. We're done considering changes. At what level of government have you ever heard a government official say, the policy we have is perfect, it can never be improved, I don't want any more data, I don't want any more testimony, I don't want any more feedback, right? In what business have you ever heard something like that? If you were on the board of a company or a nonprofit and they said, look, we have the perfect approach here, we're not going to listen to anything else, right? You would begin to fire that CEO. You'd be holding a private meeting. You would be hiring a recruiting firm, right? That's what you'd be doing, and honestly, that's what we're doing. We are the recruiting firm. We at Save Austin Now, because that's what we're doing next year. And so you're here tonight, not just because you want to hear about the homeless situation, and not just because I hope you want our city to be safe again, and I'm going to talk about that, but the long-term plan, the reason we're here and what we were trying to do is we're trying to put moderate, mainstream, normal people in our city council, in our mayor's office next year. And that is going to be the most epic battle in the history of our city. But we're building every single day. We are raising an army. That army is a silent majority of Austinites who want this place to be a great place to live, work, and raise a family. Shouldn't be too much to ask for as much as we spend in taxes, as much as we pay in taxes. So just to finish on the homeless, after they said that they weren't going to consider any more changes, they made our minds up for us. Cleo and I don't enjoy petition drives. We're a little bit crazy, but we're not that crazy. I promise you, they're nasty, brutish, and long. All right, they're horrendous. They're horrific. They make them as difficult as they can possibly be. You can buy a boat. You can buy a house. You can buy an engagement ring. You can do all kinds of complex legal maneuvers on your phone through DocuSign. For the city of Austin to exercise your right to petition your government, put something on the ballot, you have to sign a piece of paper. Right? Pretty hard to do during shelter at home. Pretty hard to do in the early days of COVID. Right? We launched our first petition drive in February of 2020. We had 2 or 3 good weeks. We were well ahead of pace. I was feeling really good, and then all hell breaks loose. And so we convert to text messages. We convert to mail. We had to raise a lot more money than we thought we had to. In August of that year, July of that year, after 148 days, we turned in 24,500 signed petitions, more than 20% more than we needed. We really thought we'd done enough. Right? The personal relief I felt turning in 24,500 petitions was a feeling unlike any I've ever had. I'll tell you about the only other feeling that compares to that in a minute. They come back 12 days later and tell us we're 900 short of 20,000. You have no ability, no recourse to get on the ballot. Never felt lower in my whole life. They analyzed our ballots. We didn't have the evidence at that point to sue in a credible way. And so we could have sued and raised money and told people we were fighting, but that would have been pro wrestling. And I don't like pro wrestling. I never watched it when I was a kid. I couldn't name a pro wrestler if you put a gun to my head. We don't do that. We focus on battles we can win. We focus on meaningful battles. Battles that are going to affect people's lives and livelihoods and their careers and their jobs and their communities. So we did raise money for our legal defense fund, but the first thing we did is we filed one of the more detailed public information requests in the history of Austin. If you've ever filed a public information request, chances are when they came back to you and they analyzed it, they said it's going to be $100. And in 90% of cases, people don't pay $100. They're offended that asking for emails or text messages about something public costs $100. We filed ours, it was $3,800, we paid within 2 hours, 2 weeks later we get it back. I don't want to get the lawyers excited in here, but the thing had 68 exhibits. All right, so you can think about the billable hours that were involved in analyzing that. But we did analyze it, and we came to a conclusion of the 10 justifications that they used to throw signed petitions out. 5 of them were valid, 5 of them were invalid, and we did sue on that basis. I'm not going to walk you through that lawsuit all the way to the end because we had to kind of change strategy recently for a very good reason. But I don't believe we were short. And I believe they thought they were really clever at denying us from being on the November ballot in 2020. As it turns out, being on the May ballot in 2021 was a much better political environment for a lot of reasons. I still think we would have won, but it would have been a lot closer probably. So what did we do? I was very dispirited, very demoralized that we weren't going to be on the November ballot addressing this homeless disaster that the city created. So Cleo and I started a board of a PAC we called Fight for Austin, 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats, 2 independents. We agreed to focus solely on public safety issues. We agreed to send a questionnaire, 4 questions, to every city council candidate, get it back, we'd endorse in the races where we thought we could make a difference. Our goal was to force 2 council runoffs and to win at least one of those council races, really try to win both of them. In 10 weeks with no data and no nothing, we raised $480,000. We forced the 2 runoffs. Allison Alter and Jimmy Flanagan were both drawn into runoffs at less than 40%. 4 weeks later, we defeated Jimmy Flanagan with Mackenzie Kelly. We probably put $300,000 of the $480,000 we raised in Mackenzie's race. And she's been by far the best member of the city council, the current council. It's not even close. That's a low bar, admittedly, but she's been very good. She's been very good, and we have high hopes for her going forward. We came 400 votes from defeating Allison Alter, which would have been an earthquake had we gone 2 for 2. And we had probably 25 grand more, we would have done it. But so we come up short, but it was still an earthquake. It still had a lot of consequence. We didn't have one ally in the city council before Mackenzie got elected. Not one person that we could work with. Not one person we could even talk to. But we did now, and that's been helpful in a lot of ways. So we wait till early December, and we start our second petition drive from 0. A little bit like digging a hole for half the day, taking a 30-minute lunch break, digging the hole again, waking up the next day and doing it again. That's what we decided to do. In this case, though, we had all the data from the first effort, and we learned. We decided, you know what, we have to self-validate. We're not going to take their word for how many valid, we're going to do it ourselves. And trust me, that is an unbelievable task. So we did that. We had 2 or 3 dozen people working for 3 weeks, 12-hour shifts, self-validating every petition. I convinced one donor to give us $65,000 one time so we could text every Austin voter. That identified 22,000 new likely supporters who wanted to sign our petition. So when you take the 24,500, you add 22,000 to it, you have a pretty good universe of people to target, and that's how we got there. And so in the end, we collected almost 6,000 more petitions in 1/3 of the time, in 50 days. 2 days after we turned them in, we turned them in, I forget the dates, all the dates run together, but we turned them in, we collected 30,000, we took 3,000 out we couldn't validate, we turned in 27,000. 12 days later they come back and they say you have 26,103 valid. 96% validity rate, highest in the history of the city. That was a very good feeling. 2 days later, Steve Adler, our mayor, worst mayor of my lifetime, probably the worst mayor in the history of the city of Austin. I haven't lived through the entire history of the city of Austin, but eventually I'll study the history and I'll come to a conclusion. But as of now, based on what I know, he's clearly in the top 2. He announced for the first time publicly that the camping ordinance has failed. It's not because he woke up that morning in a penthouse in the W Hotel residences, looked downtown, and concluded that the policy had failed. Okay? It's because we worked our asses off twice to put something on the ballot, and it forced him to grapple with political reality. He was mugged by political reality. So we then launched the most intense 10-week period of my life, and probably Cleo's life, which was the effort to pass Prop B. 9 out of 10 council members against us, the mayor against us, every Democratic organization in our city against us, every elected official who's a Democrat against us, but we had extraordinary support. And the policy was so clearly failing, right? I mean, you can be compassionate and care about the homeless, and we do. We're not anti-homeless, we're anti-camping. Camping is a behavior. Camping takes a public space, it converts it to a private use, it affects public health and public health, our tourism industry, our neighborhoods, our intersections. The list goes on and on and on and on. It's just bad for everyone. It's bad for the residents, and it's bad for the homeless. If you're living on the 7th Street Bridge, you are not getting delivered services from our city. You are not getting drug and alcohol abuse testing and treatment. You are not getting mental health treatment. You are not getting job training. And what's happening in these unsafe, unsanitary, and unregulated encampments is unspeakable. It's absolutely unspeakable, particularly what's happening with children and the women. Thankfully, our city's done a relatively good job of getting women and children out, getting them into the Rathgeber Center for Women and Families. So they've been doing some work in that regard, but it's bad. So over that 10-week period, we had 4,000 donors give $1.9 million, never been done in the history of the city. And in the end, despite Steve Adler predicting it would be a very close election, 3 weeks before the election at South by Southwest, we won 58% to 42%. Almost 91,000 votes. It was about where I thought we'd be. I predicted before the polls closed we'd win 60-40. I can walk you through why we did that if you want. Let's go to that during questions. I really do want to get to the issue of tonight. We took Sunday off. On Monday we decided, okay, what do we need to do to get on the November ballot? And I thought we had more time. I thought I was going to have a restful summer. Turns out there was no time. We had to be on the ballot. We had to be turned in by July 20th to be qualified by August 3rd. That gave us 55 days from right then. We had a little more than that. In the end, we took 23 days to develop a very thoughtful ordinance that addresses the single most important problem that we're facing right now. And so we launched that ordinance May 23rd, it was May 26th, and we spent 55 days in this case collecting signatures for the police situation on the ballot. I'm going to tell you what that is in 1 second. The hardest thing I've done yet, that we've done yet, without question, we had to raise $700,000 to put that on the ballot. In the middle of summer, after hammering our donors to give us money to support Prop B and pass it. You got to remember, the homeless issue is visible. People concluded in many cases on their own that this policy could not continue. And we had a 2-year buildup. We didn't have that in this case. All right, the police staffing crisis, the defund vote, and the violent crime wave that we're dealing with are not visible problems, not to the same extent. You have to be engaged, you have to be reading the news, you have to be on Nextdoor to really understand it. And so, in a sense, speaking sort of allegorically here in a sense, we sort of created an issue, right? We didn't have the buildup that we had on the homeless. And so there was a ton of education that had happened because of that, and that's why we had to raise the money that we did. Lauren organized 34 fundraising events that we held in 26 days. You can imagine what our nights were like. And she did, the vast majority of that work. But we had extraordinary financial support, and we got it on the ballot. And I can tell you, maybe the most rewarding thing about this police battle we've been engaged in is the feedback we got from police officers after we got on the ballot. I'm telling you, they did not believe there were 25,000 people in this city that supported them. And so to get 27,700 petition signatures in 55 days after raising $700,000 gave them a lot of just kind of good feeling, right, and momentum and a sense of purpose and support. They have done nothing but feel undervalued and undersupported for the last year. They have felt nothing but a bullseye on their back, right? Anything they do is on a body camera. Now they're going out by themselves instead of having a partner with them. Look, folks, we are in the single most profound staffing crisis in the history of our city, and it's not even close. And honestly, I don't need to give you a flowery language. I'll just give you the numbers. And every number I'm about to say is 1,000% accurate. Our city had 1,800 police officers 1 year ago. As of this morning, we have 1,540. That's 260 down in 1 year. We are going to lose 100 to 150 between now and February. We will be on the high end at 1,440 and on the low end at 1,390 by next February. That's a 25 to 35% decrease in 1 year. Honestly, 1,800 wasn't really enough because safe cities, the national standard for safe cities is 2.0 per 1,000 population. 1929 is really where we should be, and we're nowhere near that, and we're falling fast. Why is the problem getting worse? It's getting worse because the attrition rate we have right now is getting worse. We've never lost more police officers in 1 month to resignations than we did this month, which was 25. The last 5 or 6 months have been anywhere between 15 and 22 every month. We have one way to add officers. They have to go through the academy. The academy takes 6 to 7 months of instruction and 1 to 2 months of field work. That's 7 to 9 months. You start with 100, you graduate around 80. Okay? Our current class will not graduate until the spring. So let's say it's 15 a month, every month until the spring. That's 150, or at least 120 by the spring, with no ability to add anyone. None. So why did this happen? It happened because our city council voted 11-0 last August to cut or reallocate 1/3 of the police budget. They cut 150 police positions with one vote. They cut $20 million immediately. They took $130 million and gave themselves the authority to move it to anything they wanted. Okay? Most of it's gone to homeless spending. We wanted to see the homeless taken care of. I can tell you right now, having now reviewed the internal audit that McKinsey demanded, we just got back. Won't shock you to learn they're not spending homeless dollars efficiently. They can't measure outcomes. They can't tell you how many homeless beds have been produced. They got money going to groups that the city council has no knowledge of. It is a scandal. It's a scandal, and we're like a dog with a bone on this. We're not going to give up on this because the only thing that explains to me their suicidal commitment to this homeless ordinance is corruption. So don't worry, we have not given up on the homeless issue. It's getting better. It's not where it should be. That's why we sued. That's why we worked so hard to pass the state law, which took effect September 1st. But just to finish on this police thing, we are in a profound crisis, and it's important that you understand exactly how serious it is. Why is it serious? That budget cut has come at a terrible time. Our population is going through the roof. Violent crime is up across the board. And some of these stats, I hope by now, are becoming stats that you've memorized because I've memorized them, and you're starting to see them. As of this morning, we've had 64 homicides this year. Okay, 2 years ago, we set a record in 2019 for the city of Austin with 34. We've never had 34 homicides in 1 year. The next year, 2020, we decided to go 25% higher than our all-time record, and that was 48. We're at 64 as of this morning. We're on track for 86 this year, 79% increase on the current trajectory. Folks, it's going to be worse than that. And the reason for that is attrition is going down, population is going up, and violent crime is going up. The delta is growing. So I can honestly say something that's going to sound hyperbolic, and that is it has never been less safe to live in Austin, Texas than it is today, and tomorrow will be less safe than today, and next week it will be less safe than this week, and next month will be less safe than dismount. And that is a horrifying thought. And if there was something I could do about that tonight or tomorrow or next week, I'd do it. All we can do is pass Prop A, November 2nd, with early voting starting October 18th. So, what is Prop A? It does three things. Okay, number one, we ensure adequate staffing at the police department. 2.0 per thousand. We've been there before. We had 1959 authorized strength 2 years ago. That was more than 2.0. We had 2.0 available officers from 2003 to 2006 when we had the lowest violent crime rate in the modern era. Over 200 cities over 50,000 have 2.0. Over 100 cities of 50,000 population have 2.4. Dallas has 2.9. Houston has 2.4. Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, New York, Chicago, the list goes on and on and on and on. Folks, you have to have adequate staffing when your city is growing as rapidly as Austin is. So number one, we require a minimum standard of 2.0 per 1,000. But we combine that with an increase in community policing. And I don't know anybody that thinks we shouldn't have more community policing. But we do have that in there. We do that through a minimum of 35% community engagement time for eligible officers. That's a provision that Brian Manley specifically, strongly encouraged us to put into this proposal. So second, we double police training. I'm as proud of this as I am of anything because I think this is going to make a bigger difference than anything else. Our police officers do not believe they've been adequately trained to do their job. I spoke to 115 of them, Austin Police Association membership meeting 6 weeks ago. I had a little bit of an awkward icebreaker. I started off by saying, raise your hand if you think you've been adequately trained to do your job. Not one hand went up. Think about that when your job is a life or death job. Okay, it's not like you weren't trained to be a lawyer or trained, to do another blue collar type of job or white collar kind of job, right? Spouses do not know if their police spouses are coming home every night, and to think that they've been inadequately trained is really unconscionable. Why have they been inadequately trained? It's because the curriculum that we have now is 40 hours per year post-cadet graduation. We double that to 80. Why is that important? Why is that meaningful? Why is that, I would say, profound? I'll tell you why. Having talked to the academy, having talked to police leadership, it's going to allow us to include things in the curriculum that they want, that they don't have time for now. De-escalation training is number one. Everybody wants the police to de-escalate situations. Wouldn't it be good if they knew how to do that effectively, with confidence, in a way that doesn't make them defensive or make them a target? Skills-based training, scenario-based training, close quarters combat training. Folks, George Floyd should be alive today because that chokehold should have been administered the right way. A chokehold administered the right way does not put that person at any risk at all of losing their life. The second reason George Floyd should be alive today is those police officers should have rendered aid. And it is now the law of the land in Texas and in the city of Austin that we don't do chokeholds and that we do require police officers to render aid, and that's a very good thing. We can be in favor of police reform that's smart, right, that doesn't put police at greater risk. Cutting 1/3 of the police budget doesn't do that. It's not smart, it's not targeted, it's not defensible. In fact, it's ridiculous. So we do double police training. I'm really proud of that. I think you should be proud of that too when this passes. Because you can go out and say Austin has the best and most trained police officers of any major city in America. And that's going to lead to better outcomes. And that's something we should all want. Third, we do have police reform in our proposal. We think reform is a reasonable part of this. Look, the cause of addressing racial disparities in policing and in our criminal justice system is a righteous cause. Cutting 1/3 of the police budget doesn't do that. It's not thoughtful. We don't have one person at the city council that's thoughtful, with the possible exception of Mackenzie Kelly. These are not thoughtful people, sadly. But they're managing, a $4.5 billion budget, the 11th largest city in the country, one of the fastest growing cities in the country, and they cater to 10 or 15% people that live here. The hard left. Democratic Socialists of Austin. Homes Not Handcuffs. The Austin Justice Coalition. Right, these are groups that have a very radical vision of what they want our city to become. It's not a vision that 60 or 70 or even 80% of our city support, I don't believe.
Police abolition.
Yeah, they literally believe in abolishing the police. That's where this is headed. And if we fail, I'm telling you, that's where this is heading. We're going to be at 1,300 police officers or 1,200 police officers at the end of next year. You are not going to want to live in the city of Austin with 1,200 police officers, trust me. So police reform is part of this. We incentivize minority hiring, not through quotas, which is a race to the bottom, but through foreign language proficiency incentives. If you speak one of the 5 most spoken foreign languages in the city, you have an incentive to join the police department. Retention, huge problem. We don't give a bonus to every police officer. We don't give it just on years of service. We give it to our best officers. How do we define our best officers? They have something called the Good Conduct Medal. 3 things to be current on your good conduct medal. Show up for every shift on time, number 1. Number 2, never have a serious complaint. Number 3, mentor other officers. If you do that every 5 years and you're current, you get an incentive to stay. Third, we believe that taking into account demographics, including racial and language demographics, should be part of when they assign officers on neighborhood beats. It would be a wonderful thing if we lived in a country where race didn't matter in terms of policing, but given where we are in this country right now, we think it is best, and I know the police think it is best, to have black officers patrolling black neighborhoods, Hispanic, and Asian. You're going to rebuild community, the bonds of community trust more quickly. You're going to have mutual understanding more quickly. And so we're not requiring it if the officers aren't there, but we are requiring them to consider it when they put officers in specific neighborhoods. Finally, we have a stunning lack of curiosity in the city of Austin at the government level when it comes to understanding how the police department operates and what a police officer goes to on a daily basis. 9 out of 10 council members and the mayor have never gone on a ride-along and have never gone to the Citizens Police Academy. We're going to change that. It's in the ordinance. If you're on the Public Safety Commission, which has direct oversight over the police department, you got 3 months to do it. If you're the mayor or the city council and you haven't done it, you got 6 months to do it. And if you're a staffer to any of those people, you got 12 months to do it. Folks, we are not screwing around. This is a thoughtful, balanced, reasonable proposal. We've polled it. We have significantly. We polled Labor Day weekend. We're going to poll again in two weeks. But we've got to get our message out. Let me tell you about 2 other consequences that have come from this. I'll take your questions. Response rates. This is really important. Our average response rate to a priority 1 911 call, these are the more serious 911 calls, on an average night in Austin when the year began was 7 minutes and 30 seconds. It's now over 10 minutes. I don't know about you, 7 minutes and 30 seconds sounds like a lot, right? If you're bleeding somewhere, somebody stabs you, it sounds like a hell of a long time. 10 minutes is a hell of a lot longer, and those minutes are the difference, right, between surviving or not. They're really the difference between being able to live a life you want to live and not. Why is that happening? It's happening because we don't have enough officers to respond. And I'm telling you, on a weekend night, it's not 10 minutes. It's 15, 16, 17 minutes. Okay, so response rates are through the roof. That's having significant impacts on people who are the victims of violent crime, right? So I'll give you 2 examples. 3 Saturdays ago now, there was a stabbing outside Star Bar on a Sunday night, I actually spoke to the guy. He works at Little Woodrow. I have somehow connected with him recently. Spoke to the guy that called 911 and saw the stabbing occur. Took the dispatcher 7 minutes to answer the call. 7 minutes on top of 10 minutes, probably on top of 15 minutes, right? That's 22 minutes, right? Just bleeding out. 4 Saturdays ago, on Labor Day weekend, we had the worst response rate in the history of the city of Austin. This is not because the police don't know what they're doing, it's because they cannot handle the incoming. They had 5 urgent calls come in basically at the same time. 3 what they call hot shots and 2 priority 0 calls. These are even more serious than priority 1. They were only able to respond to 1 of those 5 calls in a timely manner. Again, not because they don't want to. Folks, 4% of scheduled police shifts are fully staffed right now. Think about that for a second. It's even worse than you realize, and let me explain why. Let's say you're serving up north a shift that has 10 officers, and there's 4 people who show up, which happened 3 Mondays ago. Those 4 officers don't cover 40% of that territory. They cover 100% of that territory. And they have to go serve that shift whether 4 people show up or 10 people show up. But think this through for a second, right? Not only are they covering all that territory, but they have to cover it the best they can. So instead of having 5 cop cars with 2 officers in each one responding to situations, you got 4 cop cars with 1 person in each one, and they're going different directions. So you're 1 officer, you show up at a serious situation, you probably have your hand in your gun when you get there. And you're more likely to defend yourself and overreact and escalate, not de-escalate, right? So if there's one thing that pisses you off about everything I've said tonight, I hope it's this.